Hello and welcome to Decoding SAML runes and how to set up SSO quickly in Jamf Pro. I'm Sean Rabbit, and I'm a Senior Consulting Engineer for Identity here at Jamf. My pronouns are he and him, and for the audio listeners only, I am a light-skinned white male with short brown hair wearing a Jamf-branded t-shirt. Glad to have you here today with us. Today's topic is a breakdown of SAML and how it both works in a high-level general sense, as well as how to read, interpret, intercept, modify, and adapt SAML tokens to work with Jamf Pro. We'll also cover simplifying a zero-touch scenario and onboarding new users by passing our Jamf Pro SAML login information over to Jamf Connect. Copies of these slides, links to some of the software we discussed in this section, and any other important notes or errata found after recording the session will be available on my GitHub page. That URL is github.com/SEAN-RABBITT. So let's get started on our first topic, the anatomy of a SAML token. Single sign-on, the glorious promise of one username and password to rule all of your tools. One single time to log in. Think of the time savings, the password simplification, the security of multi-factor authentication. But too many times I've seen folks get dragged down into despair when they see things like this. The gobbledygook of a well-known endpoint. Like, what the heck is that even supposed to mean if you could read it? So let's make it easier for you. Let's begin at the beginning. I hate that security and identity management folks seem to make up names and acronyms with complex words that really should be simple things. And the first step to knowing more is to ask people what the heck an acronym or initialism stands for right away. Be brave and ask immediately. SAML means Security Assertion Markup Language. And even that's complication. Security assertion, or translated roughly, I just logged in. Did it work or not? Markup language is easier. Some standardized format that we share between computer programs that one program knows what the other program's talking about. Easy. Altogether, it's, hey, did that login just work? Spoken in a language that everyone understands. A SAML token is really just the response we get back from some central server that says, yep, this person is the person they say they are, and they're on my list of folks to get into my club. The central server and the list of folks able to get into that token comes from an application definition. That'll usually come from a cloud identity provider or an Active Directory farm of some form. Another big bag of angry cats is the process that application will determine if someone's login is really safe, but we're not going to get into that now. That application will handle the login, so our service doesn't need to know a username and password, or multi-factor authentication code, or validate the authenticity of a letter from your third grade teacher. It just sends over a response to an endpoint, literally something in our service that accepts the response, munges it to read it. SAML is sent in an XML tagged format. So that's your good old less than sign, name of a thing, greater than sign, wrapping around some information we need to send to another program. The metadata is the identity provider application's way to tell our service what we're about to get and what's in it. We'll tell our service to expect a name, an email address, a list of groups that person belongs to, their age, their shoe size, whatever you want. Our service will probably ignore a good half of that information because we don't need it. But it gives the cloud service a list of what we're going to see and pull out of the response. The stuff we are going to pull out of the response is called a claim. So let's actually look at a sample token and a claim. And yes, this sample driver's license from the state of Nevada is a token response from an identity provider with claims on it. The identity provider is the Department of Motor Vehicles of the state of Nevada. The token is actual physical plastic card. And the claims are what is written on the card. The claims we have are last name, first name, address, a unique identifier, in this case a driver's license number, expiration, etc. All of these are things that could potentially be in a SAML response. And if we want to go for completion, the metadata source is that book of state IDs that the bouncer at the club has to make sure you're not trying to pass a fake ID to get into the club. Now, let's look at a real SAML token. A token is broken down into sections. You got a header that has a bunch of stuff that we won't really care about, but there's a section at the top that says response destination. You'll notice that this is the place where this batch of XML is going. Now, this came from Okta in this sample, and it's going to a server in Jamf Cloud. The URL is the endpoint that actually is eating and munging this data. Then you got a big old chungus of signatures and validation information. Now, for us personally, I don't need this information. This part of the token is signing certificates, expiration, create date, and how it shouldn't be valid before a specific time. All of this is handled by our cloud application to make sure it's getting a legit response. You want to know more about signatures and CRC checks and envelopes and wrappers and whatnot? Go read a spec document because this is the easy mode presentation. Lastly, we got the good stuff, the stuff we need, the stuff we can read. This section contains the claims, also known as attributes. Remember how security professionals like to make things complicated? Well, a claim is an assertion. Oh, it's also known as an attribute. So yeah, complicated a bit more. Let's zoom in a little bit more. XML wraps up claims in a bunch of information about the claim and then the value of the claim. In this case, we have an attribute with the name of real name. Inside that string type, contents of the value of real name, in this case, Sean Rabbit. That's me. So if cloud service needs to know my name, my cloud service can now read this field from the SAML response and know that I'm Sean Rabbit. It may be confusing, but the name of an attribute does not need to be just a simple string. In fact, many times you'll see a claim name given a schema URL format like here. This particular claim is a set of groups that our user belongs to. First, you'll see this URL has a domain of xmlsoap.org, or the XML Simple Object Access Protocol. And if you're probably one step ahead of me when you realize, hey, that website has a bunch of definitions that a bunch of us all agreed on that would set a standard. xmlsoap.org is owned by Microsoft, and they, along with a bunch of other folks, decided that groups belong in an attribute with this standard name. So cloud services can expect that this will be a standard place to read a token to see groups. It's just like our driver's license. It's a standard of the state of Nevada that my family name is the first field on a driver's license. If you check this group attribute, it has multiple values, and that can be a problem sometimes. If you have an ancient Active Directory of doom with 1 million groups from the last 75 years of your organization's AD life, you could be sending hundreds of groups. A SAML token can only be so big, so you must limit the groups you send in your SAML token to just the ones that we're interested in. Your app doesn't need to know that Jimmy is a member of the You Must Remember This podcast fan club group you made 7 years ago for an email list. So now that we know what's inside a token, now how the heck do we intercept them and see what's actually in them? Well, this is a bit more complicated. In order to see what's coming into your SAML response, you actually need to set up Jamf Pro to actually ask for a SAML response. Okay, I know I promised, but a little bit of a misnomer. This is the easy way to debug when SAML goes wrong on your Jamf Pro server. So, step 1, my favorite acronym from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, read the fantastic manual. Specifically, the section here on this short URL for you, jamf.it/easysso. Jump to the section called Identity Provider Configuration Settings. Here, you will get step-by-step instructions on how to set up the identity provider and the Jamf Pro settings under General and Single Sign-On to get the IDP and Jamf Pro to talk to each other. Now, on my previous slide, I joked about reading the fantastic manual, but in this case, that is vitally important. Follow the instructions exactly and precisely. I've used this line with folks before, but nobody likes to eat a medium rare cake. If you don't follow the recipe exactly, the cake will be a disaster. Same with security settings. Do not skip a step. Now, one of these identity providers makes it easier on you than the others. Azure actually has a sort of wizard mode that walks you through integrating Jamf Pro and Microsoft Azure logins pretty automatically. There's still some RTFM involved, but it's simpler. Some IDPs have pre-made configurations, like Okta and OneLogin. Some are incredibly complex, like setting up Shibboleth, especially since that tool can be configured in so many different ways. Get the basics down and into Jamf Pro. And before you hit the save button in Jamf Pro settings, general, single sign-on, remember this incredibly important URL. The failover URL is the emergency backup I goofed up and I didn't set up SSO correctly initially backup plan. It's the base URL of your server, followed by a slash, question mark, and the word failover in all lowercase. This will bring you back to the login screen if your session gets interrupted or if your login fails. Now, there are two ways to intercept a SAML request, and one I'm going to recommend. First, you can install Google Chrome or your favorite Chromium substitute. Then, go to the Chrome Web Store and search for SAML. I'll post a link in some of my favorites on the next slide. The other far more complicated method is to install a tool that intercepts all SSL traffic on a test machine, like Proxyman or Charles Proxy. Then you would take the base64 encrypted response and drop that into a decoder, like that found at samltool.com for OneLogin. This is a more complicated result. Here are some links to some third-party applications and plugins. And while the top one is my personal favorite and the one I'll use here in screenshots, none of these applications are developed by Jamf, and thus no third-party endorsement is implied. The SAML message decoder works as a plugin right in the top URL bar of Chrome, and the other two need to be accessed via the developer tools. So now we've got a short video of the SAML tool in action. First, we'll open up Google Chrome, and we'll go to a server with SAML correctly set up. I'll log into my Jamf Pro server, and I'll type in my Azure username in the format of an email address or a UPN. Then I'll do my passwordless authentication with my iPhone. And then I'm in my Jamf Pro server. Click on the little blue SAML tool, and I can capture the response token sent from Azure to my Jamf Pro server. Pretty simple. Once you attempt to sign into your Jamf Pro interface, either successfully or unsuccessfully, simply click on the SAML icon in your URL bar window in Chrome. You now have a copy of the token that was sent to Jamf Pro with all the claims in it. Use the Copy This Message button in the app to copy the information to the text editor of your choice so you can dig in and search for the claims in the token. Now, one of the biggest issues I've seen with people setting up SSO in Jamf Pro is attribute mapping. Now that we've intercepted the token, it's time to match the attribute, or claim, to what we have set up for matching users in our Jamf Pro server. To make your life easy, let's talk about a best practice about users. If you're going to have SSO set up in your Jamf Pro server, you should have almost no users at all in your Jamf Pro Users and Groups page. The only users you should have in your Jamf Pro Users and Groups would be the initial user who was first created when you first set up your Jamf Pro server. Any API-only users with access limited to only the rights they need for doing their API jobs, and possibly, and not absolutely required, a user with only enrollment rights to do a user-initiated enrollment simply. All other access to your server should be gated with group membership, like which is shown here. Everyone who is a member of the System Engineers group is an admin on this sample server. When we take this method of access via group, this entire section of the single sign-on setup area becomes moot. The user mapping does exactly what it says. Map an attribute or claim in the SAML token to some username and their permissions in the Jamf Pro server. If you use group membership instead, you now do not need a separate user in the Jamf Pro server. Jimmy Bag of Donuts may not have a user in the Jamf Pro server listing, but he's been assigned to a group in your central identity provider to let him have access. This is the goal of unified user management. What is important is that the username matches up for your schema for an LDAP lookup for a user. So if you're using LDAP or the cloud identity providers to fill in inventory information on a device assigned to a user, this username should match your username in that directory. So in this case, I'm using Microsoft Azure as my IDP. Azure uses a UPN format for its usernames, but my internal Active Directory uses a short name for LDAP lookups. I'll map that attribute name to what shows up in my SAML token claims. Now, if your specific attribute you need isn't in the claim yet, don't panic. We'll get to that in a few moments. Let's get back to groups and mapping them. Groups are sent to Jamf Pro in two ways. The first, OG way, is the inside the SAML token itself. Again, we map the attribute name, even if it's a weird one like this one named in the format of a URL, to the Jamf Pro server so it can get the list of groups. If the user is a member of the system engineers, they'll get the admin rights because there was a system engineers group in the Jamf Pro users and groups list. The second is a new cloud identity providers option for Jamf Pro, which replaces a traditional LDAP setup. Note the last option here on the screenshot, transitive groups for SSO. If this box is checked, we ignore the groups that came through in the SAML token. Instead, we'll pull a list of all the groups the user belongs to through the Cloud Identity Providers connection, and we'll use that for group membership and access rights instead. This is a perfect solution for when you have a billion groups that a user is assigned to instead of being limited to the 1024 byte size of a SAML token. We can send that info over another way. Whew. That's a lot to get through. Aren't you glad this session is recorded? Now that you've captured your token, now that you've seen the attributes or claims in it that need to match up to stuff in the Jamf Pro, let's work on what happens when what you need is not in the token. We're going to show the two most popular identity providers here, Azure and Okta. But almost all IDPs allow you to make modifications to the SAML token and add and remove information from the token. If you're not the person at your organization who handles the administration of the IDP, talk to your coworkers who may already know how to do this already. If not, they can follow some quick instructions here. In portal.azure.com, navigate to Azure Active Directory, Enterprise Applications, and search for the name of the app you created for your Jamf Pro server. A new Manage Navigation bar will open on the left of the screen. Select the single sign-on option. The screen will reveal an edit icon shaped like a pencil in section 2, User Attributes and Claims. Click on that edit button. From here, you can use the buttons at the top of the screen to add a group claim, which may not have been included by default in your initial setup of your app. You can also click on the value column of a claim name to edit the information returned in that attribute. So let's look at the group claim first. By default, Microsoft sends group information in a group ID format, which is the UUID of the group as defined in Azure Active Directory. This isn't a very human-readable format since it's in a hexadecimal format. If available, you can use the source attribute option to pick the SAM account name option instead, which presents a human-readable format. Note, though, if you have lots of similarly named groups, you may want to stick to the group ID format. You can also restrict which groups are sent in the claim. Pick the option that is most appropriate for your organization's data structure. If you pick an attribute that's not in a group, you have the option to insert any source attribute into any claim name, or make up names yourself of your own claims. You also have the option for the transformation as a source, a powerful macro language that can do data manipulation. Don't have a field that has a user's full name? No problem. Use transformation to combine a user's first name and last name with a space between their names, and send that as part of a claim. Just remember that the name of a claim cannot be a reserved word or a URL like part of the XML SOAP spec. Otherwise, the limit is your imagination. For Okta, navigate to your Okta admin portal, and in the new interface, select Applications, and no, I didn't repeat myself, and select your SAML, your Jamf Pro SAML app you created. On the Sign-On tab, you'll find a pull-down tab to edit the attributes and an option to change what groups are passed via the group claim with a regex statement or a simple matching setup. Okta gives you lots of options for adding claims to your SAML token. You can pick from information in your Okta database, information from fields in a federated on-premises directory, or you have a powerful macro called the Okta expression language to munge data in any format that you need. So for example, let's say you are using Okta by itself without an associated on-premises, but want your usernames made with Jamf Connect to have the format of firstname.lastname. And your email addresses are formatted this way for your organization. Well, this command strips the beginning of an email address off and drops it into a SAML claim. Simple. Which means we're coming into the home stretch. You've intercepted a token. You've seen what's in the token. If what you need isn't there in the token, you now know what to put in there. Now it's just a matter, copy and paste. Simply pick the name of the attribute now that you know where to find it, paste it on into Pro. Test your login with a private browser mode to make sure a user can get in and get the permissions they expected. And now our last topic. If your user is doing a zero-touch enrollment with Apple Business or School Manager tied to a Jamf Pro server, why not make their login experience even simpler? We'll do this with an enrollment customization. In your Jamf Pro server, navigate to Settings, Global Management, and create a new or modify an existing enrollment customization. When you select Add Pane, one of the options is to add a single sign-on authentication using your new SSO setup. This will gate users at the door with SSO login you created. And now, at the bottom, you have the option to enable Jamf Pro to pass information in that SAML token to Jamf Connect. Now, Jamf Connect needs two things: a claim that will contain a user's name that will become the user's short name, like Robert.Paulson. And it needs a second claim that has the user's full name in a single claim, like Robert Paulson. If your existing SAML token does not have that information in there, modify your SAML tokens. You can add those fields, maybe even with that macro language we discussed for Azure or Okta. Then simply put the name of the attribute in the account name and account full name fields. Note, if you leave the account name blank, we'll try sending over the name ID to Jamf Connect. Usually that's an email address, and Jamf Connect will properly munge the information for before the @ symbol to make the user account. Then, when your user enrolls a computer and logs in, instead of being prompted again for their username and password, it'll simply be a password screen. One less step to make life easier for your users. If you'd like to learn more about zero-touch configuration in Jamf Connect, visit our Jamf blog for a full workup on how to create a beautiful workflow with customization, logos, and more at this URL. We've covered a lot today in this session, but I hope that now you feel more comfortable with the complex world of SAML tokens. Understand that it's a lot simpler than it looks at first, and how to help debug and find the right info to stick in the right box in Jamf Pro. The folks at support can also help with the Jamf Pro side of things, but remember, contact your support at your identity provider for more information on how to modify the SAML attributes. We're all in it together, and thanks again for joining.